Hello, welcome back to theCUBE here. I'm John Furrier. Here in our Palo Alto studios, we got a great leader here on the program here, really breaking down the future of retail, the tech under the covers, and then kind of where it's going. And I see a lot of action with NRF this year in New York City. And of course, we want to unpack that. Nitin Mangtani is here, is SVP and GM of Salesforce, former entrepreneur, sold his company to Salesforce. Prior to that, Google and a variety of tech experiences. Great background in tech and in the retail, which is being disrupted in a positive way, really enabling this next wave of technology to change the user experiences and all kinds of opportunities in retail. And thanks for coming on theCUBE. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks, John. Thanks for welcoming me. It's just delightful to talk to you and be here with you.
So one of the things I noticed in New York when NRF was in town recently was the presence of Salesforce there. Tons of meeting spaces. We try to get you guys to come over to our NYSE studio, but everyone's in meetings, doing business. So business is good for Salesforce and retail. I can just kind of sense that. Give us a take of what's going on with retail and Salesforce. Obviously Agentforce is Dreamforce, Agentforce. There's a lot of action. You can connect the dots of where agents will go, certainly on retail, but there's a lot of tech involved, a lot of data. What was your takeaway and what was the presence of Salesforce at NRF?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been just a couple of weeks since we came back from NRF. I would say this is the first year, truly the first year where NRF looked like a retail AI conference. and it's massive. Those of you who haven't been to NRF, I've been to NRF for the last 20 or so years. And you can almost think about it's the Dreamforce of retail, right? And it's really bringing the entire industry together. From the Salesforce perspective, we had a huge presence. Yeah. And we always had, this is a community we know very well. And we talked about Agentforce broadly across the entire spectrum of retail. Mm-hmm. So we did there were two big launches we did at NRF. There was Agentforce for retail. So Salesforce, one of the beauties of a company like Salesforce is it's a very horizontal company. We play in healthcare, telco, retail, media, manufacturing, right? So we play into all these verticals. And while we're building a lot of horizontal technology, but we are then also making sure that it's tailored for that vertical. So here the focus was Agentforce for retail. So that was one big announcement. The second big announcement was directly tied to the acquisition. I was founder and CEO of PredictSpring, the point of sale company that Salesforce acquired in September of last year. So we launched what we are calling it Salesforce Retail Cloud, which is around stores and modern POS. So those are the two big focuses from our perspective.
Yeah, and obviously Salesforce, obviously legendary cloud before cloud. The data cloud is rocking. We had a lot of great conversation with some of the teams in Salesforce at Dreamforce around harmonizing the data layer. Great agent activity going on from a tech perspective. So a lot of busy engineering going on at Salesforce. But one trend that jumped out at me this year at NRF, and it's kind of consistent with some of the other shows that have AI. I mean, supercomputing used to be an HPC show. Now it's basically a full-blown AI semiconductor kind of app show. Is that the online, offline intersection is almost like first party relationships. Post-COVID, you're seeing a lot of people now completely fluent with digital action, whether it's mobile or online, but the physical stores are now coming back too. So you're seeing kind of the confluence and the unification of stores, physical face-to-face, relationships, whatever that vibe is, brands, with a fully connected kind of first party like experience and certainly data around digital, and that's a business transformation. It's not just technical transformation, it's both technical and business. What's your view on this? Do you see it that way? Can you share insight into kind of that confluence of physical, face-to-face, digital, hybrid kind of connection? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, and I'll kind of maybe cover in two different sections. I'll talk about unified commerce, which is the online to offline bridge, and I'll talk about the Salesforce data strategy, and how this is really a unique differentiation in AI. Salesforce's strategy, you mentioned data cloud. So let me start with unified commerce and then we'll switch gears and talk about Salesforce data strategy. On the unified commerce, you're absolutely right. Like, we go through these waves, which is, even when I was at Google, like this is early 2000s, right? Like I was talking to the broader retail industry and there was a lot of concern around e-commerce disrupting their business model. And we always said that, well, embrace the change, right? Which is, you have to follow the lead where the consumer is going. Mm-hmm. And if the consumer behavior is shifting, you have to shift it. But we also told them that, look, one of your unique assets is you have all these amazing stores, so you can actually blend those two channels more effectively than somebody who only has online. Now, interestingly, these things take a lot of time, and COVID was the forcing function, which actually finally brought those two channels together because people were buying online but going and doing a pickup in the store. And that was the first real use case, which in COVID, curbside pickup became like number one. And what used to take 3-year projects, people managed to do it in 2 weeks. And this is the beauty of innovation. Sometimes, constraints or forcing function
Yeah.
delivers, magical things. But anyways, fast forward today, I always, my perspective has remained same, whether I go back all the way 20 years ago or today. Like the terms have changed. We call it omni-channel, multi-channel, unified commerce. The point here is pretty simple that at the end of the day, this is your customer, right? Like, whether I'm shopping at, Crate and Barrel or that I'm buying a jacket at Ralph Lauren, I'm not thinking about online versus in-store. I'm thinking about, I love this brand and I want to buy a blazer from this brand. I'm wearing a Suit Supply blazer here. I've done online shopping. I've also been to their stores in Centennial Row. And again, for me, it's more about buying a Suit Supply product than the channel. And that's how we all should think about that. Both channels are important.
Yeah, and I think the branding things too. I love that example, and I think COVID was a forcing function. Necessity is the mother of all inventions, right? As they say. And I think what's interesting too is that as you look at what agents are going to be doing, the consumer will be tied to the brand because their intent is to engage with the products that they love. And it's like, okay, now we have multiple options on where to pick up, as you point out. How do you see agents affecting shopping? Because now you talk about the data cloud. You say, okay, process is key, right? Process, AI seems to focus in on process, domain expertise. But a lot of the companies used to have those separate departments. Oh, they run the website, and then now they bring them together, so that's happening. I totally agree. But now it's like, I don't want to change my tooling. I might change my process, but I don't want to do all this heavy lifting. I have to do all this change. I'd love to just keep my tools that I like, maybe change the process and abstract away some of these other complexities. But I need the data, right? I got to have the data, but that's the internal transformation that the people who have to implement. What's your take on that? Because I'm seeing a lot of people saying, yeah, I see the future, but how do I get there? There's a lot of like, how do we build it? How do I integrate it? Like, there's a lot of that in the weeds. It used to be IT department concept, but that's not IT anymore. It's like bigger picture.
Yeah, and IT has a bigger role to play. The CIO, the modern CIO is very sophisticated, but they have a different role to play now with, because it's the first time we're not just managing people, but we are managing the digital agents, right? So it's a digital workforce, right? So in some ways, IT is becoming an HR department for the digital workforce, which is a very fascinating way to think about it. But your point on data and how do you get an ROI, I think, one of the things about Salesforce and, our founder, chairman and CEO, Mark Benioff, is his vision, right? I mean, he invested in Data Cloud 3 years ago, right? Much before Gen AI and all the AI wave started, because he understood that unlike, consumer web, which is important, search and kind of agentic experiences on consumer enterprise is all about data, right? And he also, has mentioned several times that eventually these models will become commodity. And we saw this with DeepSeek, right? Like the entire valley last week woke up and they're like, wait a second, is this, is this possible? Can you do it?
Innovation, maybe.
And this is, again, Mark's vision was very clear that yes, some of these models will become commodity and the differentiation is going to be data. The beauty about Salesforce is that we already have highly structured, not just data, but also metadata. And we have built a reasoning engine to make sure we can make actions, you're not just having a conversation, you're actually taking actions. So like in case of retail, if you placed an order, and let's say you change your mind, you're like, I actually don't want it to be delivered to my home, I'm gonna just pick it up because I realize the Stanford Shopping Mall has this product. Well, now you can just literally talk to an agent and say, I've changed my mind, can I go and pick up the order from Stanford Shopping Mall? It knows who you are because it validates you. It understands that you have an active order. Obviously, it will ask you for confirmation, so there are guardrails and there's authentication. So there's obviously security and trust built into this layer. But outside of that, you could get this done in less than 30 seconds as a consumer because you change your mind, and then you can just go and pick up that product from Stanford Shopping Mall instead of waiting till Tuesday of next week. So I could literally go and pick it up today and wear it tonight, that blazer, for an event.
Nitin, scope the use case a little bit more, because I love that use case, because I think that's the personalization that agents will thrive in. Because, I mean, imagine just book my flight, book this trip, book this appointment at the store, I want to get fitted for a jacket. I mean, all these things are agents could do that. How real are we? What's kind of the reality of what the shopping experience is today? And then scope the opportunity of how fast it could accelerate, because, you can abstract away all these databases. Now, data is the goal. We know that. You guys have got a lot of data at Salesforce. So now, but it's always been that challenge of, well, it's got this schema over here, it's integration project. But now you're seeing this abstraction where search, discovery, managing data is a lot easier when you build that AI layer. But how real is it? Take us through that reality of, and are payments involved? Do I have to pay? Is it more search and discovery? So take us through this, what's available today reality-wise, and then what's the scope of what's coming and how fast could it come?
Yeah, I'll talk to you on both what's really live today, not just available. It's actually deployed. And then also kind of, what's the effort required? Kind of, and this is where Salesforce has done some real innovations on building a platform to build agents without having to write hundreds of thousands of lines of code, right? So it's very thoughtfully done. On the first question, what's real today? So I'll give you two concrete places, right? So kind of you briefly mentioned, in any shopping journey, it starts with the discovery experience. You may have an intent or you may not have an intent, right? So you might have a very precise intent saying, I'm looking for Nike sneaker shoes. In that case, you have already narrowed your choices. Or you might have a very broad-based perspective that, I need a new pair of shoes. You don't even know if you want dressier ones or the sneaker. You might start that broad, right? But in both the cases, the experience starts with discovery. And what we have built is agents which are almost your concierge, your personalized shoppers, who know your purchase history, who know your browsing history, who understand your price sensitivity, who understand your taste and likes and color preferences. And they are able to give you these recommendations without you having to parse through thousands of products. Because search has been there, right? Search has been there, like, even when I was there back in Google days, the first product actually, the shopping world Google launch was called Frugal. Most people may not remember.
Yeah, that was your product.
that was, and then, obviously evolved. So the concept of like having a e-commerce search is not new. We have been all in. But the problem with e-commerce search is it's very limited because you're just given these hundreds of products that you have to then go and parse and decide. Versus the agentic layer is giving you much more curated experience. It almost feels like, sometimes you go to a store often, let's say, your favorite store here, that you go often, and an associate knows you, right? Because this person has helped you multiple times. And like, they would not just point you to, oh, here are 500, trousers, go and pick
Go to that department.
They will bring you 3, right? Because they know you, John, and they're like, well, I'm not going to bombard you with 50 pairs of pants and you have to decide now which one. They'll say, I think you'll like one of these 3. And that's what this agentic layer is doing for us.
I can't wait when the agent knows I'm in the slim cut shirts. But this is the point. I mean, this is not just go into the department. It's like, okay, I understand you. And then now just kind of like just riffing on what's under the covers, the old way of doing things was multiple databases. So search was always kind of have to be engineered. Okay, search is done. We see RAG, we see all kinds of reasoning coming out with the kind of the new innovations. Now the next thing is stitching it together in a generative way. How do you see that? What scope that acceleration? How fast we're going to start seeing, one, predictive, hey, you might want to love this new shirt. Looks like you're doing great. Computer vision might spot me and say, hey, you might want to upgrade this. And then, oh, by the way, here's 5 available stores. You want to buy it right now and connect to my credit card.
Yeah, I mean, this is the main difference with Gen AI, right? Like the agentic layer essentially is going beyond just data retrieval. It's going all the way to the action. And the action, actually you have to have a lot more reasoning, because if somebody's telling the agent, go and refund me the money, well, we definitely we support that use case, and our agentic layer has skills that you can train on. So as an IT department, you can decide whether you want to train this agent on this skill or not. And then you can also decide that whether you want to have guardrails. So you're like, okay, the agent can refund items below $250 if they have been purchased in the last 30 days, right? So you could define guardrails, and that you can take the load off your service team. But for something different, the agent can quickly hand that case to the human. And that's the fundamental difference in this agentic layer, is around the actions deeply coupled in data, so that, because the precision here is fundamental. We can't refund somebody else's item, right? So a lot of the what is tolerable on the consumer web, where you get a lot of these ambiguous answers, and sometimes you're not sure. Unfortunately, in enterprise, anything less than 100% is not a good accuracy. You need to
Exactly.
precisely refund. If it is $140.92 and there is a tax that needs to be refunded along with it, that amount has to be precisely refunded to the right user, to the right credit card.
You know, we have tons of content from Dreamforce, now renamed Agentforce, around whole data harmonization and the future of agentic. So folks watching want to check out those videos. I want to ask you about the point of sale. You mentioned that earlier, because I think one of the things that came out of NRF, at least from my standpoint, was, and you know, search, I get the search, you nailed that, 100%, getting better, discovery's great, personalization, but revenue matters for your customers, right? They want sales, right? So sales. So there was an analogy on one of my interviews where the guest said, you know, imagine like walking to a store and you have all the stuff you want and you're just running into an invisible wall and you just can't break to the counter to pay. You know, that could be a payment problem. And so there's all kinds of unpacking there. You know, who's doing the transaction? But the concept of point of sale is an old construct. Hey, I bring stuff to the desk.
Yep.
They swipe it. Maybe I throw my Apple ID or I swipe my credit card. Okay, that's at a kiosk. That's at a point of sale station. How does point of sale move into the new experience, which is, it could happen any time in my journey? I love this. Oh, I want to buy right now. How does the point of sale piece technically, and then how are you guys thinking about that? Because you can meet the consumer where they are at any point of their browsing. They could say, I want that, something can get pushed to me.
Or just an inventory check, like, do I have this pair of shoes in my size
Yeah,
and
take us
color?
through your vision
Yeah.
of what are the challenges, how does point of sale shift? Obviously, you don't have to be a rocket science thing, it's going to change, but like, what's your vision on how point of sale just kind of becomes fabric of the experience?
You know, a lot of people don't realize, like, so we're going to do, in the retail industry this year, we'll do a little over $5 trillion in sales in US alone. Right? It's a massive industry. You know, a lot of times we don't realize how, and depending on the retailer, you know, they are doing anywhere between, you know, call it 70 to 80% of their revenues in store, in the physical store still, right? Now, e-commerce is continuing to grow and we don't distinguish. Like for us, the channels is just like noise. So we always tell people that both channels are important. The ratios will keep switching. But more importantly, we actually are at a point as of, you know, maybe a year ago where every single transaction is touching both the channels. That means you might start your search experience or talk to an agent on a website, but go and make a purchase in the store. Or you might go to a store, have a look at the products, feel it, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to go home and then make a decision. And then evening you fire up your phone, you're like, yeah, actually that product, I'm going to go ahead and buy it. Press Apple Pay, the product gets shipped to you. And it might get shipped from your store actually, because that might be the closest place where the product is already available. Now, that whole concept where every single interaction is touching multiple channels didn't exist a few years ago. People always segmented them, in-store use case, online use case. And this is where, to your point, like the definition of POS fundamentally changes. Because all the POS, you're right, like POS has been around for, in fact, I'll tell you a precise date. POS has been around more than 100 years. Obviously, there was no credit card machines 100 years ago, but the concept of a point of sale machine, like if you've seen some of the old ones on Google Images, where you can, the concept hasn't been new, right? The problem is the concept never evolved, because the concept was always about, I want to buy 3 products from a store, which I call it cash and carry, right? So the POS was nothing but a cash and carry device. But in a modern world, which is customer experience first, unified commerce, online and in-store has no difference, and you want a magical experience where after you selected a product, nobody wants to wait 20 minutes then in a line to check out. Well, I already did the discovery, I found the product I love, and now please get me out of the store because, you know, I have other things to do. Anyway, so if you combine those 3 things, the fundamental concept of POS changes, and this is where we saw the biggest opportunity, where the POS market had not evolved, and we rethought the POS experience. Now, you can see it practically, right? Like if you go to Suit Supply, which is one of our customers, all their associates are carrying an iPhone. That's it. And by the way, with the recent innovations we did with Apple, you don't even need a credit card reader. The iPhone, you can simply tap a credit card on the iPhone. And the iPhone is truly now, it's a POS. it's a barcode scanner because it has a camera, and it's a credit card reader because you can just tap your phone. So mobility just goes to the next level, and that directly, delights the end user experience because you're right, you can check you out at anywhere in the store. But it's a lot more than checkout, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, it's got computer vision in the camera. You got the software on the device, connects to the back end, cloud, retail cloud.
Inventory is a big part of this entire, like inventory moves to the cloud now. This concept of like, I'm limited to what's in my store no longer matters. There's a term we call it endless aisle. The aisle never ends when the inventory is in the cloud.
I think the point of sale is totally ripe for reinvention because of the structural change, and you point out a lot of that. The customer experience obviously drives everything. So when you look at use cases where you see you guys being successful now, what are some of the areas that are like, here's where we're delighting the customers specifically, here's where we're driving more revenue, and revenue comes up, hey, I bought the product, but through all this process and it's not available. You mentioned inventory, that's a big one. So where are the use cases where it's working strong right now, people are being delighted, and no one even thinks about POC? It's the point of sale is POS, point of sale is right there, native.
It's a full application, right? It's not just that small machine sitting on the side. It's just like any other computer application. It's much more smarter. To your point, first of all, when we think about POS, right now our focus in retail industry includes home furnishing, home decor and home furnishing both is big. Lovesac is one of my customers. If you go to any Lovesac store, there are more than 300 stores in our country, and they make these amazing sectional sofas. It's a very complex sale. Because when you're buying a sectional sofa, and they came up with these amazing patterns in their industry where they can essentially think about the sofa almost as modular blocks. So it's the same modular blocks, but you can just design it however you want. What used to take almost an hour for them, because it's a complex order that the associate has to punch in, now they are able to do it within a few minutes in our POS. Because we really brought the experience, because they were working on a very old POS system, which was more like an ERP type of, you've seen the ERP interfaces. They're not the nicest user interfaces out there. So that's one big example where, the complexity of an order in home furnishing is almost order of magnitude more harder than buying a blazer or a beauty product. So we are doing a lot there, and we have some amazing customers. Bouclair is another customer we have. They are in Canada. They have these amazing home decor stores. And their founder, he's big on experiences, all around the experience. I talked about Suit Supply. We are live with Suit Supply, and this is another thing most people don't know. Like, to make your POS work in Europe, you need very advanced certifications because of the tax laws are in Europe, and they want to make sure there's no tax fraud. So they call it fiscalization. So France, Italy, Germany, Portugal.
They have the sovereign kind of policies.
And there needs to be, every transaction needs to be kind of digitally signed to make sure that the tax was properly taken. But anyways, it took us a while to actually build this. So we are live with Suit Supply in 25 countries across the world. With this, and this is the other change we have seen. Prior to us, many of our customers would have 5 or 6 different POS companies. So they'll use somebody in Europe, somebody in APAC, somebody in US, somebody in Mexico, and that's hard because when you have 6 POS systems, your IT department has to put so much effort because they're just marshaling data across these 6 POS systems. So again, that's another example where
silos are not good for AI, right?
Exactly. You need a data. And so global is another big use case where we feel we have the right global footprint. And now, especially under Salesforce umbrella, we have such a strong global footprint. We are a global company. But anyways, it's the verticals. Because to me, the horizontal SaaS is day before yesterday's news. It's the verticals and the agentic layer is really the future, because the experience we want to deliver, or what we delivered to Deciem, which is one of the beauty companies owned by Estee Lauder, is very different than what we delivered to Suit Supply, and it's different than what we delivered to Lovesac and Bouclair.
And also the data is very specific to the domain, which actually feeds the agent intelligence.
Personalization is different, right? Like looking for a blazer versus a beauty product which goes on your skin tone and other things, versus looking for a sectional sofa that will fit in your living room. Those are 3 very different, and the agent needs to have the skills, the agentic layer, to understand those nuances.
So I want to get your thoughts on the industry. Really love what you guys are doing. Again, love the conversations we've had with the Salesforce engineers we've been talking to. Obviously, retail, as you mentioned at the top, was that it's an AI show for retail. It's the Dreamforce for retail, Dreamforce for retail, I think you said. As you look at, given your technology background and experience, it's going to get more technical. There's a lot more innovations going on under the cover, so to speak, to get agentic and let these agent builders build agents and be a great experience for customers. What do you see happening, big picture, in the industry outside of the normal retail stuff? If you were covering the trade, but technically, what's the disruption levers that you see? Is it edge and connecting to data sets? Is it the point of sale? What are some of the big levers that are moving fast that people are, it's a disruptive enabler for the industry?
Yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of times, I want to double click on the time to develop these agents, right? So if you look at the history of technology, right, there are two main things which, according to me, decide the success or not, right? The first one is consumer behavior. The consumers are not, using certain things, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, every business is serving some consumer eventually. It might be B2B, B2C, but you're eventually serving to a consumer, right? And to me, the consumers have already spoken very clearly, given the success of all consumer side that's going on, like DeepSeek and everything. So the consumer behavior, including mine, I don't go to search interface for almost 80% of my interactions, which were traditionally search, are now going to an agentic layer. 80%. And that's, I'm not unique. And, you look at the monthly active users for other kind of, successful products in the market with Gen AI, it's clear that they have taken, so that's the first thing. The second thing which is important is time to market, right? If the technology takes 3 years and you need hundreds of engineers and you have to write all this code to deploy an agentic layer, it's not going to be successful. You don't want this to be like an ERP project, a 5-year ERP project where the success rate is, I don't know, 20, 30%, and you spend these tens of millions of dollars. And that's what Salesforce has done, is very unique to Salesforce, right? Which is, we have dramatically reduced the barrier to build agents. Today, anybody can build agents on Salesforce platform. It's all, there are a bunch of skills which are pre-available, so you don't need to do anything, you just turn those on. If you want to add your own skills, we also have the extensibility built into it. We integrate with, obviously, all the data that you have in Salesforce, whether it's CRM, whether it's commerce, whether it's marketing cloud, all the data is out of the box available to you. But we also support zero copy integration with external sources. We understand that we have some data outside, we can do it. And I think eventually this thing is fundamentally going to change how IT thinks about deploying agents, because if you can deploy an agent in 2 weeks, the example I gave you, the buy online, pick up in store during COVID, you have a lot more openness to invest and deploy than if it takes 3 years to deploy your first agent. And that's where I feel Salesforce, the biggest value we are providing to this thing. I mean, we obviously have a massive reasoning engineering, we have the data, but also it's the time to market and the platform we have built to build agents.
Yeah, and I think retail, and I said this in theCUBE when we were covering NRF in New York, is that I think retail and healthcare are two big disruptive markets, because there's a lot of devices, there's a lot of data, there's a lot of databases and silos.
A lot of people, both retail and healthcare, we have a lot of people.
People are involved, so you're seeing the same music kind of being played in terms of the innovation equation. And I love that the fact that there's a pre-existing chatbot, pre-generative chatbot market, so people kind of used to the experience. I want to get your thoughts on how people build. I love this whole builder thing, because I love agentic, I love agentic layer, and I love those geeky conversations. But we're having an event in April, and we renamed it Agent Builder, because people want to build and deploy agents.
Exactly.
That's specifically what they're doing.
For their domain, for their kind of use case, and they want to make sure it has their skills, guardrails.
And they get it. They understand why they're doing it. So there's a lot of action on building, not so much, but now you talk to the tech people and the IT departments, or the people running the platforms, they have to do some work. So I want to get your thoughts on 3 scenarios I see, and if agree or disagree. There's one group that says, okay, top down, we're going to do this, we're going to build agents. Now, am I taking costs away with the technology innovation? Then that's a whole kind of like thinking. People want to have a focus on cost reduction. And then there's another group that says, I want more productivity and profit. So I don't really care about cost, we're well funded. I'm not optimizing for cost recovery or cost reduction, taking cost out, because there's a use case for that. So profit, I got a retail product, could be luxury brand, whatever. And then the third scenario is a company that says, we have all these sandboxes, and we have a very narrow production pipeline. So you have kind of like three kind of like people who are leaning into one of those things or all of them. What's your take on that? Because all three are in play, and some companies have a large sandbox, tight, narrow window or a high bar for production because they're mission critical, and the sandboxes are blowing up with action as people are experimenting. Do you see the similar picture with big retail companies? Are they thinking that way? Are they more just, we have a good platform? What do you think about that? What's your reaction to that?
I think two things I would say here. One is, there's a clear realization that you're not building your own LLM. In the early days, there was some misconception that, do I need to build my own LLM? And that's commodity now. And now, like, DeepSeek might be the kind of, the trigger. But honestly, the writing was there on the wall, right? Like we had so many companies who had built their models, right? So the models were commodity. And if I'm a CIO of a retail company, I don't have 1,000 engineers, right? So even if I used like—
So they're a consumer of AI.
I'm consumer of AI with my data and my domain knowledge, right? So the differentiation I have, if I'm a brand, what are my different? I understand my consumers better than anybody else. I know how to build product, right? Like I know how to build shoes better than anybody else, right? I have my data because consumers are interacting with me. And I know how to deploy and test it because I can get the feedback in my domain. I don't need to go outside my domain, right? So I think that realization that I don't need to build entire model. Instead, I want to focus on data. And that fundamentally changes the number of resources you need, right? Because you're not trying to build an army of engineers. Instead, you are saying, I have my existing IT department, which already has access to the data and domain knowledge. Let me use a platform like Salesforce, build an agent and deploy it, right? Versus creating everything from scratch and waiting 2-3 years. And I think I think we are over the hump, but there was a misconception even 6 months ago, I felt, So that's one thing which is clear. Now, as far as top line versus bottom line, I mean, honestly, all are right answers.
It's all lines.
It's all right. Like whether it's productivity improvements, whether it's increasing sales, whether increasing margins, I think all are right answers. It's supply chain. There are so many use cases. Honestly, like this is one of those things where instead of thinking what's the killer use case, we have to think about AI just being fabric for everything we do from here on. It's not one killer use case. It's just that every workflow, every business application, every interaction your team has or your customers has, they all will go through this agentic layer.
Nitin, it's been great to have you on, sharing the insights, and appreciate you coming into the studio. Final question to end us out and play us out is, what's next for you? You're the GM, SVP of retail. You're coming out of NRF. You got the 2025 plan ahead. What's the focus? What are you guys thinking about? What's the key breakthroughs for you this year that you're focused on?
Yeah, it's a great question. It really boils down to 2, maybe 3 things. Unified commerce is a big part of our focus. I believe Salesforce is the only company which has all the pieces of the puzzle. We have digital platform, which is our Commerce Cloud product. We have order management system. And now we have POS with the PredictSpring acquisition, right? So we have all 3 pieces of the puzzle to actually, and then we also have the CRM and the service side of the equation, right? So if I'm a brand and I want truly unified experience, we have all the pieces of the puzzle. Now in the same breath, we are very open. And I'm the living proof where I was outside Salesforce, still I was able to integrate and which I really admire Salesforce. There are companies, and I don't want to name it here, where they claim they're open, but their checkout, you can't touch their checkout engine. You cannot change their payment provider. To me, that's not open. And Salesforce it provides you this amazing experience while being open, and will continue to march on it. And the first thing, which is really the P0 here, is the agentic layer, right? Like we have done some amazing launches at NRF coming out of MNR just 2 weeks ago, but we are just still like day one on this movie. There's going to be so much more innovation around agentic layer that you'll see throughout the year. This whole metaphor or how we think about commerce, because the underlying theme is pretty simple. The moment you reduce the friction on commerce, the pie increases.
Yeah, and open also gives you a chance to change and grow, and with reasoning and all these intelligent capabilities, it's going to get smarter.
Oh, absolutely. The reasoning engine we have built is already delivering us results, which even for us, is way ahead of the curve that we thought at this time.
Nitin, thanks for contributing to our Retail Week NRF coverage. Appreciate you coming in.
Thank you, John. It has been a pleasure. Awesome. Thank you.
I'm John Furrier here at theCUBE, covering all the action as we called Retail Week, our media week in New York City. Thanks for watching.